morning. It's Ron. It's Saturday morning, a little after 10 a.m. Let's get started. See if we have any questions today. Uh, last we met last Monday, we spoke from Genesis, looking at the end of chapter. Okay, guys, let's go ahead and get started. Please mute your phones. Hello.
I'm sorry, Ron. We just had an accident outside the door. What were you saying?
Are we ready to get started? Are we?
We're already recording.
Okay. Okay, good. Okay. Yeah, just saying we on last Monday we talked about kind of fielded questions and looked at the end of chapter 13 of Genesis and beginning of 14, looking at the development or the awareness of Abraham as he became aware of himself and who he is. So that's where we left off, and we just want to see if we have any questions on anything that occurred this week. Any questions or comments? The floor is open.
At some point,
Good morning. Good morning. I'm sorry, Pastor. Were you speaking?
Go ahead.
I was just going to say good morning, and at some point, can we speak to the spiritual implications of what's happening with Israel and Hamas?
Yes, I would love to do that. Right.
Well, are you going to? Are you going there first? Is that our question? First question? Or does someone else have a? Yeah. Well, if there is something else that come to your attention that you would rather speak to first before we get into that, because that may take a while.
Yeah. To see if there are other questions before I do that. Okay.
Okay. Anyone else may have another question. Pastor's going to get into what's going on around the world, specifically in Israel, and how that impacts the rest of the globe and the spiritual implications of it. But do we have anything else that you'd like to first? Okay, then, Pastor.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
I have gotten calls this week from people on this line as well as other people or not in regards to what is transpiring in the Middle East. I think that a foundation should be laid so that we can see how we got to where we are right now in terms of the war. You've heard, most of you anyway, if not all of you, about the establishment of the State of Israel beginning in 1947 and being established in 1948. Well, what happened is Eastern Europeans were on a ship called the Exodus, and they were seeking to dock in America after escaping Germany and Eastern Europe. And they wanted, and the U.S. would not let them dock in New York, and neither would the British allow them to dock in England. So they went to the United Nations, they meaning the U.S. and Great Britain, specifically, and other Western European countries, went to the UN and asked the UN to petition a portion of land for the establishment of a home state for quote unquote Jewish people. And the UN petitioned 56% of that area for what is now known as Israel. However, footnote, today, Israel occupies over 80% of that land. All of it was done without consent from the UN. They took it. So during the course of the war in 48, it's prior to the establishment in 48, the war in the Middle East started, meaning that the Eastern Europeans began to clear Palestine of its inhabitants. In Palestine during that period, there were Christians, Jews, Muslims living next door to each other. But the Eastern Europeans who sought to establish what they call a state called Israel decided that they wanted the property of the Palestinians. So they literally evicted them from their properties. Palestinians fought back, and the Palestinians were deemed to be insurgents or terrorists, while the true colonizers, the Eastern Europeans, were spoken of as Jews returning to their home. I'll get to that in a minute. And during that period of time, the Eastern Europeans, as the Palestinians fought back, the Eastern Europeans were getting assistance with more modern weapons and heavy weaponry from the US, Britain, France, other Western European countries. And they were overpowering the Palestinians. And during that period, the car bomb was invented. And that was invented by Menachem Begin, the first prime minister of that land that's called Israel. And they pushed people, the Palestinians, into refugee camps in Syria, Jordan, Lebanon, and some other countries, but primarily Syria, Jordan, Egypt, and Lebanon. Where the camps, the refugee camps, became a permanent home, because after the war ended, they did not allow the Palestinians to come back into their homeland. And the reason Egypt today will not allow the Palestinians to escape through Egypt is because they know what the plan is. The US and Israel and its cohorts in Europe plan to force them into refugee camps. And when they force them into refugee camp, they're not going to allow them to come back to Gaza, and Israel will take over Gaza. And in the north, Israel is now attacking the West Bank with the plans to do the same thing. So the objective of it now is to complete the colonization of that part of the world. Now, what is happening now, in subsequent years, let me put it that way, what happened in subsequent years is that Israel always provoked attacks from the refugees or the Palestinians until they got them pushed into a 25-mile strip. 2.5 million people live in the Gaza Strip, and they are the most crowded place on earth, as you've heard on TV probably. And every time that they were criticized for what they were doing, they began the mantra of anti-Semitic and one hate Jews. are those who are speaking against what they were doing, rather hate Jews. So what they did from that point, from the early 50s forward, they used that mantra to bully people into not speaking or criticizing the genocide and the colonization of Palestine. And if you spoke against what they were doing, the JDL in this country and other Jewish organizations in other countries in Europe would label you as an anti-Semite. And that meant that you were going to suffer for criticizing what Israel or what the Eastern Europeans were doing to the Palestinians. One example of that is that meaning the group with whom I worked in DC, there was a National Black Political Convention held in Gary, Indiana. And Doug Moore was the leader of our delegation. And he asked me to write the position paper on Israel, and I did. And when he presented it, because he was the delegate leader, it was accepted by the body. And when he got back to DC, his shop, he had an African bookstore, and his shop had a sign on it: "Do not enter, under siege by the Internal Revenue Service." And all of that was because of what happened in terms with that position paper in the state of Israel. And they made every effort to drive him out of business. However, he and Patrice Lumumba has established a import business, so he was able to survive it. I tell you that as an example of what extent they will go to in order to make you suffer for criticizing Israel. Joy Reid is not on the TV, on the news, MSNBC, because she told the truth and corrected the lies on her show. When one of the persons she was interviewing said that they decapitated babies and raped women, she stopped him and said, "That has not been proven by this news organization or any news organization that I know of. And I need to say that." Well, she's not on air now. So let me put a pin in this for a second. My suggestion to all of you is to boycott MSNBC. Go to CNN, go anywhere, but do not go to MSNBC. Now, so today, here we are. Well, let me back up. First of all, there is no such thing as a Jew. There is no such thing as a Jew. There is nothing in the Bible that alludes to Judaism or Jew. Nothing. The word that was translated as Jew was Judah. So and there is no reference in the Bible at all to a landmass known as Israel. It's never been a landmass. It referenced people who ruled as or who committed themselves to Elohim. That's what that means. And so therefore, to call yourself a Jew is to call yourself non-existent. To say you believe in Judaism is a non-existent religion. There's nothing to justify it in the scriptures at all. Therefore, the Eastern Europeans have pulled out of thin air a name that has no reference to a landmass and called it Israel. Simply because you call it Israel doesn't make it real. No different than if you call a washing machine or oven or stove, it does not change the function of it. Therefore, that landmass still has the same function that it has had from the beginning. And that is, in that area, the Africans believed, and the Muslims, the Palestinians, the African, everybody believes that this is the center of spiritual life, Jerusalem. And they began to call it the center of the world. So simply because you have colonized the area and sought to change not only the name, but the function of it, does not make it real. To this day, it is my contention that this is the most important discussion, if not one of the most, if not the most important discussion that we have ever had, making every effort to understand the spiritual implications of this conflict. The other part of that is this. Jesus was not a Jew. As I said, there's nothing in the scriptures that references a Jew. Jesus was a Palestinian. And in order to keep Jesus from looking like us, the message was Jesus is a Jew. And the Jews were Eastern Europeans according to Europeans. Now, the religion that was practiced in that area, or the spirituality that was practiced in that area by the Africans, was a portion of what Jews call Judaism, but they did not label it at that time as Judaism. That was the way they honored. That was the way they honored our Creator. They called themselves Israelites. They did not call the land Israel, because they were no different than Islam. And Islam, in terms of the meaning of the words, Islam means to surrender, to commit, or to be committed to. Muslim means one who submits to God or Allah, one who has committed their life to Allah or to God. And Israel, as I said earlier, means those who are committed to God. Now, that does not label a religion. It's simply saying that this group of people have committed themselves to a higher being. And all of that was altered by Europeans, and it was enforced by the barrel of a gun. Today, it's still being enforced. This time, instead of shooting people in this country, they're actually moving people from the positions that they are holding. If you say that Israel was wrong for what they are doing, then you get punished. Now, today, I do not, now I repeat, I do not condone the killing of anyone. I do not condone the murder that Hamas, the killing that Hamas did, any more than what Israel did. Now, however, I do understand it. I do understand it. It is no different than what happened during revolts by enslaved people. When you enslave a people, or when you put them in a prison like Gaza, then at some point they're going to rebel. What people are not paying any attention to is that Israel would they would put through a blockades when they got ready to add to in order to punish Palestinians or to keep them in check. They would cut the power, no fuel and no food, no medicine going into that area. They controlled every aspect of the life of the Palestinians. They pushed them as close to the ocean as they could without drowning all of them. They can't even go fishing without permission from Israel. This is no different than the enslavement of us in this country. We could not go hunting or could touch a gun to hunt unless a white man gave us permission to do that. Just as the plantation life was of the African was controlled, totally controlled by the owners, so is the lives of the Palestinians being controlled by Israel and reinforced by this country. The Hamas grew out of the acronym was HMS, and Hamas means commitment or dedicated to. It means that it is dedicated to freeing the Palestinians from their plight, no differently than rebellions by slaves. To give you an example of what I'm saying, when enslaved people rebelled, they were called barbarians. They were called, in today's vernacular, it would have been called terrorists when they were fighting to get out of slavery. In 1800, Gabriel Prosser left to organize a rebellion in Virginia. And the militias hunted him and the others down and killed all of them. They also tortured them. They cut out their tongue, they gouged out their eyes, they hung them, they chopped their bodies up and strewn their limbs along the roadway. They let their bodies rot and dared anyone to touch them for burial. So all of these things are no different than what was happening to Palestinians in terms of the brutality that has been meted out against them. Now, am I saying that they chopped them up? That's not what I'm saying. I'm talking about the barbaric way in which they were treated. There are times when it's better to be killed than to endure the continuous suffering at the hands of an oppressor. And Hezbollah is in southern Lebanon, and Hezbollah comes from Hamas means Islamic resistant movement. That's what Hamas means. Hezbollah means the party of God. And so all of these conflicts that are taking place and all of these labels about terrorists should be looked at more deeply than they have been. You should do your own research and understand why all of this emanated, why all this came into being. Why do I say that this is one of, if not the most important discussion we've had? Because we are talking about something that we have not addressed. We have addressed enslavement in this country, in Europe. We have addressed all sorts of things. everything that in this life we wanted to be revealed. Now we are at a space where the phoniness of Israel is being exposed, and the way this country and others support them, regardless of what they do, all of it is being exposed now. It is time for this space on this earth, in this geographical location, to be what it was supposed to be. It is time for this dysfunctionality to end. And the horrific things that are taking place were brought up, are being done to bring it to our attention, but to bring it to the attention of the whole world. And if we don't address this as we've addressed other things, it will be a continuation of the same. And at some point, it is absolutely necessary that we address this, regardless of what can possibly be meted out. Now, I do believe that our protection and our guidance comes from our Creator, comes from the universe. So that is not a concern of mine. My concern is that we make sure that we don't buy into the fabricated lies that are being perpetuated. So the spiritual meaning of the spirituality, the spiritual nature of all of this is simply saying that when balance comes, when balance is manifested in the area of spirituality, then balance will be manifested worldwide. This may sound simple, this may sound crazy to some, but most of what we have done will sound crazy to other people, or to some at least. So earlier, so why does this have to happen? When I spoke about Gabriel Prosser, the reason they had organized a three-pronged attack on Richmond, and their strategy was so complex until when it leaked out to the governor, and he did not believe, James Madison, he did not believe that the African was capable of putting together such a complex attack. They used the same tactics as had been used in Haiti in 1791, I think it was. So what happened is, when the day of the attack, a storm came up, and it rained so hard until the rivers flooded, even streams became rivers, and they were mired in the mud, and they could not reach their destinations at the appointed time. The weather was so bad until movement was virtually impossible. My question was, as I read that, my question was always, why is it that the Creator would allow a storm to come of this nature when these people are simply trying to free themselves from enslavement? Why would the universe allow that to happen? Why is it that the universe seemingly was on the side of the enslavers? Well, my answer came, and the response, my answer was, it was not that the Creator allowed it, as much as it was not the way that the earth is supposed to be freed from the authority of Europeans. It was not that the Creator was on the side of the enslavers. It was that the Africans had not taken the time to understand the nature of the enslavement as well as the purpose for being brought to this place and the power that the African has. If the African had chosen to approach this deliverance through spirituality, it would have happened. But they approached it through religion, through being armed and taking life, killing people. As they were slaughtered, they were killing people as well to free themselves. It is my belief with everything in me, I do believe that we are the vanguard of the manifestation of balance in the earth. And the reason we are the vanguard to that is because we are doing it spiritually. Nothing worked when the civil rights movement grew out of the murder of Emmett Till. It reaped no benefits. The same things that were taking place are taking place now. The same thing in the Middle East is taking place ever since 1948. And there are people who are too lazy to pick up a book or to Google the history of that tract of land called Israel today and see that it was Palestine. We have accepted everything that the American European has told us about anything on this earth. We accepted enslavement to the point where there were those who told on those who were organizing rebellions. The Palestinians have, for the most part, has accepted their plight, and their accepting their plight has put them in a space where within their ranks there are spies for Israel, and the eyes within their ranks keeps Israel informed, and these same Palestinians are a part of keeping the Gaza Strip under control, as well as keeping the West Bank under control. I'm almost finished. The last things I want to say is the distinction between the West Bank and Gaza. I think it was 2006 when George W. Bush was in office. He brokered a deal with Israel that would allow those in the Gaza Strip to vote for those who they wanted to have authority over them. And Jimmy Carter and some others went into the Gaza Strip and the West Bank to oversee, excuse me, they went into the West Bank to oversee the election. And the election, they elected Hamas to represent them. And George W. Bush, along with Israel, the prime minister, decided that that was unacceptable. And they would not allow Hamas to peacefully take power in the Gaza Strip. And they brokered, they made every effort through invasions to make Hamas look like they were the ones creating the problems. And they tried to force the Fatah party on Israel. On the Gaza Strip. Well, the West Bank is controlled by the Fatah party. And they are an offshoot of Yasser Arafat. The Gaza Strip is being controlled by those who were duly elected by the people. This is the same tactic that was used that got us into Vietnam. The Vietnamese they voted for Ho Chi Minh to be their leader, and the U.S. said it's unacceptable. And the U.S. undermined that election, and subsequently we were in a war in Vietnam, simply because the U.S. wanted to control it. All the other things and the nuances surrounding that, I'm not going to get into that. The ones who were the haters or those Eastern Europeans who called themselves Jews were not the Palestinians. It was other Europeans. Who rounded up the Jews, the Eastern Europeans who believe in what they call Judaism? Who rounded them up for the gas chambers in Eastern Europe? Eastern Europe was controlled by the Catholic Church during that period of time. They were called papal states. And none of the rounding up of them could have taken place without the support of the Pope. And the Eastern Europeans assisted in doing that. Why is it that the concentration camps were in Eastern Europe? Because that's where the bulk of those who call themselves Jews were. And what is kept a secret for some reason is that Auschwitz was actually liberated by a battalion of African troops. And they talk about the freedom of being liberated rather from the camps, but they don't talk about who did the liberation. So all of these things and some other nuances, of course, I'm sure that others have looked at this more deeply than I have. My understandings come from what I learned when I was in college and keeping up with it since then. So if there are any questions or comments, please make your comments or ask your questions. However, I would ask that those with questions come first and those with comments. If there are no questions, of course, please make your comments. Thank you.
Esther, I have one final question on this. What should our response be? What should we be doing to put in the macro to bring about the change that we desire?
The absolute same thing that we have done with the exposure of everything else. Our desire is that everything that is corrupt be exposed. Our desire is that that this is different, meaning that this conflict this time is different. People will see the US, Europe, and the Eastern Europeans who are in Palestine will see them differently than they have been. People will not be afraid to tell the truth. People will not be afraid to embrace the reality that the Palestinians are living on a plantation, forced living on a plantation slash, as some has termed it, open edge prison. So our desire is their freedom. Our desire is balance for the entire earth. Is it our desire to annihilate the Europeans who have perpetuated slavery and who has perpetuated what's taking place right now? No, annihilation is not the answer. That is not the answer. The answer is our desire to bring balance and righteousness to the earth. Our desire is for the heart of Caucasian men in particular to be pricked to the point where there is a sense of empathy that they experience, so that they won't be so comfortable doing what they are doing to people of color in this earth. That's the answer, I do believe, to your question. So freedom for all without the annihilation of anyone, image and likeness, creating white males in particular into the image and likeness of the Creator. And you say they already created that way. Image and likeness is not about what you look like. Image and likeness is about what you believe and how you treat mankind. Our desire is for European males in particular to embrace loving kindness, mercy, forgiveness, all of those attributes of the Creator. Does that answer your question?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
You're quite welcome. Thank you.
Could it be that the idea of feminine energy plays a big part in this?
Absolutely.
I say that because I've seen and heard so much about the women whose children were taken or whatever. The thing that they're saying is they don't blame Palestinians. They just want their children back. And they will say things like, the Palestinians, they have empathy for them because they have children too. And that their children are not as they should be either. So they are putting that in the macro themselves as well, the feminine energy.
Yeah, I see that very clearly, Barbara. Nothing can be birthed without feminine energy. And it's imperative that we address that as well. Because if you note, in particular was referencing European males, because that has been the source of all the damage in this earth to humanity has been at the hands of European males. I want to read something. Their savagery, their savage barbarity has spared neither age nor sex. Their treatment of women, virgins, and infants would make Nero blush. Is that not what we were hearing? That the women were being raped and that the babies were being decapitated? Is that not what we heard being said? That's not rhetorical. Have any of you heard of that?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Now, the statement that I just read, was actually spoken in 1791 about the enslaved people in this country, about us in this nation. So why is it that these things are so are seemingly parallel to what I just read, today's things? Why is it parallel to what I just read? Because South Africa came to South Carolina to learn how to handle their enslaved people, the Africans in South Africa. Israel went to South Africa to learn how to handle the Palestinians. So that being the case, what's happening now is because the instructions of South Carolina. South Carolina to South Africa, from South Africa to the Middle East. And the same, I can read books and read the statements that has taken place, whether in South Africa or in this place, in America or in the Middle East, and all of them are virtually the same. What am I alluding to? If you read history, you will find that 99%, 98, 99% of everything that happened in this country that was brutal and barbaric emanated in South Carolina. There is a book called The Second. It's supposed to be, it's written about the Second Amendment. However, it deals in depth with the history of this country. More importantly, we have made statements, and Ron in particular, that white folks spend a whole lot of time thinking about how to get things done, excluding us. We are always on their minds, and not for a good reason. If you read The Second, before you get through half of it, you will begin to see how every bit of the Constitution was influenced by the efforts from people like Patrick Henry to keep the African in a place of enslavement. And you will see how desperate they were to keep weapons out of the hands of Africans because of their fears. However, now there is a weapon that's being used to bring harmony that cannot be taken away, that cannot be destroyed. And this weapon is called loving kindness, forgiveness, and righteousness, and all of those attributes of our Creator. Thank you.
Pastor,
Yes.
I have a question for you. At the very beginning of this, you said that Jerusalem was the center. Did you say of spirituality?
Yes.
Was that your term? Okay.
Yeah, it was. Go ahead.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
The reason it was is because there was in Jerusalem, there was a concentration of all religions living next door to each other, living every day next to each other without conflict. Go ahead.
Okay. That's the root of my question. If you go back to what we've studied in the last month or so, looking at the difference between a country and a nation, and how you explain that, you can go into that as you see fit to answer my question. But if this strip of land, because this strip of land is more of a country than it is a nation, it has nothing but borders. It has nothing but separations and haves and have-nots. It's everything that's opposite of freedom and harmony. You look at this and you get who occupies it and the importance of it in the world. And if you even break down the name Jerusalem, it's not just talking about peace. It's talking about the flow of humanity to completeness, to you being completely seeing who you are. That word shalom, it surpasses peace. And so when you look at this is the exact opposite of a nomadic lifestyle, not meaning that people need to literally be nomads, but that it has the opposite definition of being open and acceptable to all people and desiring of everything. So it just ironic to me, or not irony at all, that this is the place in the earth that our most important conversation is about. So look at that for me. Explain that from this being the epicenter of spirituality, and yet it's the opposite of everything we know spirituality to be.
It is, because it is no different than what we talked about. All of the chaos that has been created through racism and greed, all of this chaos is the substance of dysfunctionality. And we are not so much inclined to, but we are obligated to take that chaos, infuse love and kindness, and bring it to a place of functionality through love and kindness for the benefit of the whole of humanity. We are to melt away the borders of countries and bring into existence nations. Because countries are greedy, countries are racist, countries are misogynist, countries are evil, unripened. Nations benefit all of the people within that confine or that enclave. But not only does it benefit the people there, it benefits people all over the world. When Mansa Musa went to Mecca from Mali, he could have just gone to Mecca and come straight back. But along the way, he distributed gold. And on his way back to Mali, he did the same thing. That is a national effect in terms of a nation. You benefit everyone with what you have been given or you have been allowed to amass. Does that make sense, or does that speak to your question, Ron?
It does. Does make
Thank
sense.
you.
The other thing that's been exposed very clearly is that you can build walls around, you can build walls between people, literally. As we talk about the wall between Israel and Gaza, I literally could see the walls that we're building here in this country. And I'm sure the walls that were built in China, everywhere people have attempted to build these physical walls. What we found is that for a nation that was supposedly very militarily exalted, intellectually exalted in terms of its sources of being able to spy on people, et cetera, that all of this collapsed last Saturday. That country, that all of the things which were physically put in place to separate collapsed totally. And so that also tells me that unless we approach this from a spiritual way, anything that we design, anything that mankind designs within its own intellect is subservient spiritual excellence. It's not gonna stand. And so this was just so clear to me that this is one of the things that happened, that instead of being built on spirituality, the country was built on surrounding itself, isolating itself from its quote unquote neighbors, controlling its quote unquote neighbors with resources, and are limiting its resources in the thinking that it's protecting itself. But if you're not spiritually rooted and grounded, there is no physical protection that's strong enough to do that. Thanks.
Christopher,
So,
Oh, go ahead. This is Nick.
hey, Nick, I'll be brief. I just listened to what Barbara was saying. So, by us, if we are not spiritual in addressing this, that too is a wall. That your anxieties about this is a wall. Your anger, your hatred, your desire to be vindictive or whatever are also walls, and these are walls that are stronger than anything physical that we can put up. So that's these invisible walls is what has allowed all of this to be maintained all of these years in the first place, not just there in that region of the world, but especially here in America. So even fear is a wall that we put up. Thank you. I just want to add that.
Thank you. Yeah, I just wanted to respond to the idea of Jerusalem and that area of the world being such a chaotic place. That is, in my understanding and belief, part of the reason, or partly because, well, entirely because, as we have said previously, everything we exist within is a manifestation or like a hologram of the Creator. And every piece of the hologram at every size is the same as its source, or it has the same image imprinted on it. So in the same way that your individual cells of your own body are like the people living on this planet, the same way that your organs in your own body are like the different nations of peoples on this planet, the same way your thoughts that you think are like the mentalities of those nations of the people on this planet. At every sort of level, that same relationship is represented. And if that internal relationship within ourselves is chaotic, it produces sort of physical illness and certain kinds of physical illness. If that relationship between people is chaotic, it produces social illness, etc., up the scale. And at the level of nations, you have that similar thing. And what we've been talking about, the distinction between nations and countries, is that explicitly that a country is a sort of political economic entity as distinct from a nation, which is a group of people who are thinking along the same lines and who enjoy each other's company. But the countries, in the way that we've been speaking about it, are attacking the indigenous nations because the countries represent that sort of distorted prioritization of selfish ego above all else. Whereas the nation is a more organic thing that is attempting to grow as human beings want to grow. So it's as if our own thoughts on what we see as a global scale with all the interaction of different countries and nations, it's as if our thoughts are dominated by extremely selfish, self-destructive ego, ultimately, and it is creating chaos at our very spiritual core, which within this sort of modern era is represented by Jerusalem in many ways. And it is exactly those kinds of thoughts that exist in the macro that we are trying to change so that they are no longer self-destructive, so that they are no longer creating the type of physical chaos and violence that we see. And it is just an unbelievably difficult, in terms of the global scale, an unbelievably difficult force to resist, at least in physical terms. But in spiritual terms, there is a great advantage on the side of people who are aligning their intentions in the direction of positivity and harmony. And that is enhanced, especially when all those people are, quote, on the same page, which is why it's so important for us, I think, to understand that concept and what it means to be on the same page as a group of people who are involved in spiritual study. But essentially, the advantage is to people who are doing this kind of work, because there is a metaphysical and spiritual law that essentially says that when the positive sort of force comes together and is aligned spiritually, its effects are amplified much, much greater. And that law is called the law of squares. But if you're familiar with that, or have heard that before, but essentially it means that the positive, there's a bias, there's a universal bias towards positivity, harmony, etc. Because that is a much more efficient way of accomplishing the great work, as it is referred to. But anyway, what we are trying to and seeing being exposed is the depth of depravity to which we must meet with the height of harmony and spiritual connectedness. And you can't, as we've said probably many times before, you can't know the depth, you can't know how to tailor your response unless you know the full depth of the problem. And on a global sort of social level, what people are more and more recognizing is that we're completely insane. We're seeing the United States, not that it hasn't done this before in other ways, but in a way that is becoming part of the sort of collective awareness now more so than ever before. I believe we're seeing the United States just wholesale support genocide. And it is, I believe things like that have the effect of shocking people in a deeper way than they may even be consciously aware of, because it will, I believe, catalyze the desire and search for something else. There has to be something else, is what I believe people's sort of internal response to this be. Well, those who are seeking in that way anyway, because this is complete insanity. And in so doing, responding that way to all this insanity, we have the seed for that for the development of the new nation, the new consciousness that we want to bring into our physical experience, that we want to have dominate this earth realm, as opposed to something that is extremely selfish and negative and self-destructive ultimately. So I hope that gives some more clarity on all the concepts that we've been speaking about. And I think in terms of dissolving the borders between countries, that is kind of what we see things like this have the effect of, that is kind of what they do, because people realize that it is mentality, it is the mindset that connects all of these so-called developed nations. And if that mindset is negative, then it doesn't matter what the borders are. Like, we have to provide a new environment, both mentally, spiritually, and physically, that allows for what we know needs to come into existence, and it transcends these concepts of borders, etc. Thank you.
And at the time when the United States is supposed to be supporting this, someone looking from the outside in will see that we're like the Tower of Babel. The Congress cannot even get itself together in order to do what it needs to do, not only to secure the safety and security of this country in terms of budget, et cetera. I think people are just seeing the confusion that how can this great country supposedly help someone else when it can't even help itself internally? It is so chaotic internally that it cannot get anything done. Its laws are being dismantled. The laws that help people are being dismantled at the same time as laws that would help people are not put in the forefront of what needs to occur in order to feed people, to sustain people, etc.
Thank you. Totally agree. And I know we've probably mentioned it.
Good morning. Sorry, this is Audrey. Go ahead.
Oh, okay. In reference to the battle internally here, well, in the United States that must be fought, it is primarily, as Pastor Richard said, we do the same thing and maintain the awareness that we have, but it is primarily against religious Christianity, because the only reason anyone in the United States of that group of people cares about Israel is because they all know Jesus is about to show up any day and send all the Jews to hell. Americans do not like Jewish people. They are just as racist as everybody else. It's only that connection that creates this insane relationship we have. That's it. And it is exactly that religious insanity that has to be broken down here in the American nation, as it were, before any of this chaos can stop. And as I referenced, that is, if there were any real physical conflict to occur, it would be along those lines, and it would be isolated and not anything resembling a sort of civil war as Republicans and conservatives like to fantasize about, but it would be them killing people, speaking about how insane Christianity has become, evangelical Christianity in particular, and in general in the West. It will be that. And it would be people such as us being physically harmed as a result of speaking out about that, if we were ever given the opportunity, recognize the opportunity wherein we needed to do so. So I just wanted to mention that because that is the closest we'll come to any sort of real physical revolution as the physical correlation or the physical component of the spiritual revolution that is happening and needs to continue. But it's us in particular. It is our religious insanity that is the greatest source of negativity, probably on the face of the earth, as we've stated before. But that is where our energy must be directed in order to stop this. Thank you.
I agree with what's been said. And when Nick mentioned genocide, the U.S. sanctioning genocide, it's because that's our roots. The pastor was talking about the South Africans coming to the U.S. and learning Jim Crow laws, basically, how to keep the blacks in control. And then the Nazis going to South Africa to learn the same thing. So we're going back to our roots. Our roots are to keep whoever in place and to kill them off if they don't stay in place. And yeah, Nick, I agree. That's why I kind of see why this whole thing needs to be burned down right now, because it is all based in stuff we Americans put out there. And when I tell people that, you know, the Israeli system right now is basically Jim Crow, well, they can understand it when I say apartheid. But yeah, they don't realize that the apartheid system was based on Jim Crow. But when you tell them that, you know, they can kind of wrap their mind around apartheid. But when you tell them it's based on Jim Crow, then they go silent, and don't have much to say. But yeah, and it all goes back to doctrine of discovery. It needs to all be burned down, burned down to the ground.
Yeah. Metaphorically, mostly, sometimes maybe literally. Man, when I saw Lindsey Graham, when I saw Lindsey Graham on TV say level that place, I was like, oh my God, do I have to formally convert to Islam? Oh my God. Anyway, yeah.
But is that not what's happening? The spiritual, there's going to be there's a spiritual purging that's occurring. We talked about, or a spiritual baptism, if you will, that's occurring. And some people don't even know it yet. They don't understand it and they don't even realize it. But there are people who are understanding and quote unquote seeing it with the eye for the first time as they see all of this chaotic stuff. They are at a point where they're looking at, there's got to be more than, there's got to be a way that we cohabitate, that we live together, that we share together, that we treat people with integrity regardless of who they are, what their ethnic background is, where they come from, who their mother or daddy was, what part of the country they live in, what part of the world they live in. So this burning down is what's occurring in a spiritual perspective. And we see with the eyes are the manifestation physically of the spiritual truth that's taking hold and sweeping not only the nation, but the world.
I agree with you, Barbara. I agree with, matter of fact, everything that's been said. When Audrey was talking about all of it needs to be burned down, what dawned on me is, what came to me rather, is death and hell shall be cast into the lake of fire. Revelations. Death speaks to the concept of not knowing who you are. You can be religious or you can be an atheist. It doesn't matter. Not knowing who you are. Hell is confusion, is chaos. So ignorance of self and chaos will be cast into the lake of fire. Fire in this regard is speaking to not only a purging, but a purification. So what we are talking about is the purification of this chaos and this lack of self-awareness. So what does that look like? The chaos is the mindset that endorses and perpetuates things like genocide, especially towards a group of people who are people of color. And the death speaks to that's the mindset. Did I say it already?
Yeah.
Okay. And so what I'm saying is that this lake of fire is a metaphor for everything to be changed. So in regards to how what Audrey was saying, that burning it all down is an act of purification that results in self-awareness as well as order for humanity, or as we have been talking about, harmony for humanity. That's what Revelation is referencing when it speaks about the lake of fire. Thank you.
I have not envisioned the depth of lake of fire until the conversation today. It's like all of these things that are occurring are pulling those things together so that I understand the wholeness of what that means now. That is amazing.
Yeah, I agree.
Morning, everyone. I just want to relate to the question that Kathy, mentioned when we first, started the call. What does it mean to us? And, when I was just reflecting on, Pastor, talking about 1948, I guess, the date that the nation of Israel, came into as a nation. But in terms of us seeing or understanding the power of words, I'm really trying to grasp in my spirit when we say nations. And I know that there's been a movie, The Birth of a Nation. There have been, nations that have been created. And when we look at it in terms of the spirit of harmony, or the spirit, of order, how do we see it with our eyes in reference to what was presented to us? But now, how do we see it in the now with regards to the opportunities that we may come in the presence of to be able to change the mindset? And so I would just wanted to, just put the question of the thought out there. And I believe, Pastor, you gave us the answer, just continue to do what we do. But I think that there is that, law of harmony and order and truth, and righteousness. And I think, again, these particular words have power. And I think the reciprocity of what's happening now is because of what was done in the past. So I just wanted to share those thoughts if that resonates us. Because when Kathy mentioned, what do we do now? How do we respond to it? I really, with that question. I want to share those thoughts. I'm done.
The scripture says, vengeance is mine, saith the Lord. Vengeance is mine, says Yahweh. I will repay. We are Yahweh Elohim. So vengeance is ours. Vengeance does not look like what we have been taught it is. Vengeance is not against people. It's against a mindset. It is bring a mindset to a place of order. Vengeance is changing the mindset to that mindset that we are experiencing now, to one of loving kindness and order. So that's what we are doing. And we continue to do this, especially with us addressing what's currently taking place in the Middle East. So, but anyway, when Nick said that Christians don't like Jews, they only like one that they called a Jew. They like Jesus. But they make him a Jew because what they see as Jews are Caucasians. And they never address the reality that Jesus was a Palestinian. And it's up to us to continue to put that in the macro. And I believe that the reason people are searching also is the results of what COVID did. COVID opened the eye further than it has ever been opened in terms of people searching for something better, searching for equality, or searching for egalitarian society, period. So again, we keep what we do, stay focused on righteousness and not disregarding the violence that's occurring. The violence, unfortunately, is the thing that has brought attention to the problems that needs to be resolved. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other final thoughts on this or questions? Anyone? If not, this may be a good place to take a pause for the day.
Ron,
Yes,
as
sir.
we leave, I want to remind us that everything that we have talked about today, and in other days, of course, have been put in the macro. Also, we have spoken about releasing it. So we are obligated to release all the energy that we have been privileged to become aware of, so that the strength of it will overcome the chaotic energy that appears to be in charge of everything or in control of everything. How do you release it? By simply desiring to do that in your quiet space. 30 seconds, 30 minutes, doesn't matter, as long as it's released. Thank you.
Thank you for the reminder. Okay. I hope everyone has a great day. I hope you have any thoughts or questions and want to continue tomorrow. Of course, we'll do so. Have a great day and look forward to tomorrow morning. Bye, everyone.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.